Hello and welcome to the second part of the Explorer guitar build. In case you haven't watched the first part, please go and watch it, it's on the channel, which is where I have built the fretboard. And in this part I'm going to build the neck. This is a Korina neck blank. It's very long because I want to build a neck through Explorer. And the first thing I did to that neck blank was sanding down the surface. One of the sides was actually perfectly flat, so I didn't have to plane that down, which is nice. And because later the body wings would be glued to the sides, I also had to plane down the sides and get them straight. And I used a router bit with a ring, a pattern bit I think is what they're called, to get the edge straight. And this method worked pretty well. Later did some sanding and the sides were perfectly flat for the wings to be glued on later. I then checked where everything would go and started off routing a truss rod channel, 6mm wide and 9mm deep. And I also routed 2 more channels for some carbon fiber rods for neck reinforcement. Then I wanted to cut the angle for the headstock. I do not own a bandsaw, unfortunately, so I had to do this by hand using a Japanese saw, and that was a lot of work and quite stressful, to be honest. It's pretty hard to make a perfectly flat cut with a saw like that. So it took probably the better part of an hour, but I finally got it done with a pretty decent result. I then had to take away some material from the back of the neck. I also used the router and routed away all of the material, which was a lot of work, and it's another thing that would have been much easier with a bandsaw. Using this method was really the only means I had to do it, but it took a couple of hours to take away all of that material. And I then cut out the rough shape of the neck. It looks pretty rough here, but using the templates I had and the pattern bit with the router, I could then smoothen out everything and get it to the perfect shape. And I'm going really slowly here. And I'm also only taking away around 3mm or so in depth at a time, so I had to make a couple of runs, probably 7 or 8 or so for the whole thickness of the neck. But you really want to take your time doing this, otherwise you will burn the wood, which is suboptimal. And I then did some calculations on the neck angle, because I wanted a tunematic bridge, and I calculated that I would have to have around 2 degrees of a neck angle to get the proper action later. I made this little jig for it using 2 metal bars, and I put them on a board with 2 degrees of an angle. I know it's high tech, but it works. And I also routed away that material, which once again took a long time. And I redid the same thing to the back of the neck. Of course, there's always going to be a lot of sanding when building a guitar. And I then cut out the back of the headstock using the same method. I moved on building the body wings. I had these 2 blanks of African mahogany. I ended up using just one of the blanks because I was able to fit both of the sides on one blank. I planed them down to around 30 millimeters in thickness, I think. I used a pet saw to cut out the shape of the body sides, and the saw really had a hard time working its way through the 3 centimeters of mahogany. And as I said, I was able to fit the second side on the same blank. I just had to glue on the upper tip here. A compromise here was that the grain would not be in a straight line, so the top part that I glue on here would be a little bit running in a little bit of a different direction. You can barely see it here, but as I said, I wanted to save the other blank for another project. And I then glued the lower side to the neck blank. As you might already have seen, the headstock would not be large enough for an explorer-shaped headstock, so I had to add a little extension here and glue it on. I clamped the guitar down and put a piece of wood into a bench vise, so I have something to limit this little piece from slipping to the side, because gluing in this direction is very hard, especially because there's no square edge that you could clamp. So I built this little setup, and also I used some surgical tubing instead of a clamp to get this in place. This is the flame top that I bought for this guitar. It's quadruple A and it looks absolutely fantastic. As I put on the Explorer shape, I realized that the top was a tiny bit too small at the upper corner of the Explorer, so I also added a little extension. I could have also offset the top a little bit, so putting the center line more towards the lower side of the body, but I really wanted a center line that's in the actual center of the guitar. I think everything else looks just kind of off, so I decided to go with that little extension. I would go for a sunburst finish later anyway, so it would be invisible. I cut out both of the sides roughly to their shape and glued them together. I left little square pieces here so I could clamp it up a little easier. And I also clamped it down from the top so it wouldn't warp or anything. It's not super thick. It's I think it was 7 millimeters in thickness. After some sanding, this is how the top looked. Isn't it beautiful? That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. And the next part, which will probably be the final part, will be uploaded in a couple of weeks.